friends, welcome back to my kitchen. I'm so glad you joined me today. So we are going to make soup today. We are getting some rain and it just feels like a great fall day to make some yummy soup and some homemade biscuits for dinner tonight. So I have some potatoes, some carrots, some celery, some onion. We're going to use canned corn today because that's what I have on hand. We've got some of our better than bouillon chicken. We've got that dissolving in some hot water over here. We've got some bacon and 2 chicken breasts. So we are just gonna cut up our chicken breast real quick. We've already got a skillet behind me heating up so that it's gonna be ready for us. Instead of us waiting for it, it's going to be waiting for us to put something in it. So I am a little picky. I'm just gonna trim a little bit of this fat off of this chicken breast. I just don't like a lot of this stuff to be in my food, so I like to just trim it off, just give it a little bit of a trim, nothing too major. So yeah, we are getting some beautiful fall weather today. I'm super excited. Fall is my absolute favorite time of year. I love it because it's the time of year that I get to put on sweatshirts and big comfy sweaters, snuggle up with my heated blanket, some good hot chocolate, and just kind of hunker down. That's kind of my favorite thing to do, is just to hunker down somewhere and just enjoy a good bowl of soup. We're also going to make some fresh biscuits today to go with our soup. I found a new biscuit recipe that looks super interesting, so we're going to give that a try. We are just going to chop up our chicken real quick, just into small bite-sized pieces. Make sure that when you're cutting food to put in something, if it's something that people are not going to be cutting up themselves to eat it, and you're just putting the, you know, like you're putting your chicken or your pork or whatever it is you're putting in the food, if you're putting something in there that they're going to be eating without the ability to cut it themselves, make sure that you make it bite-sized so that you're not giving them this ginormous piece of chicken or this big huge piece of potato that's just going to make it super, super hard for them to eat. We want our food to be, I guess, user-friendly, you would say, and just make sure that it's super easy for people to enjoy, because that's the last thing we want, is to make something yummy and to have our friends and family not able to enjoy it because the pieces are too big. So I love chowder, any kinds of chowder. Mainly my favorite is clam chowder. I live in the Pacific Northwest, close to the Oregon coast, and so I love to go to the Oregon coast and enjoy clam chowder from all over the Oregon coast. That is my favorite thing to do, is to try chowders from all the different amazing restaurants up and down the Oregon coast. My husband and I are big fans of trying that. We do a lot of camping over there in the summertime, and usually some fall camping. We have a tent trailer, so we're able to camp out regardless of the time of year. We just make sure we have our space heater with us if it's cold, but we love camping over on the coast and trying all the different clam chowders. But today we are making a yummy chicken bacon corn chowder. And so we are going to have our diced chicken. We're going to have our corn and our bacon in it. Our pan over here is getting warm. We're going to go ahead and add our chicken to this. And then we are going to give our hands a wash before we move on to our bacon. Make sure that we're not cross-contaminating things. I don't want to get raw chicken on anything. So we're going to put that back up there. I'm going to wash my hands real quick. Remember, safety first in the kitchen is always an important thing. Now we have a pound of bacon. So I'm going to cook this whole pound of bacon. I'm going to cut it up and I'm going to cook it. But I'm not going to put all of it inside the soup. I love to be able to garnish our soups with something that's in it. And what is prettier than a pile of bacon on top of your bowl of soup? So we're just going to put this whole pound of bacon down here. We're just going to cut this up into bite-sized pieces. What I am going to do is I'm just going to save a small pile of this so that we can garnish our chowder with a little bit of fresh bacon and some green onions and a little bit of cheddar. Some shredded cheddar cheese will be super tasty on it. So we have you want that nice crunchy element in your soup. We're gonna get our burner going for our bacon so it's ready and waiting for us when we go to put this in. And while our meats are cooking, while the bacon and the chicken is cooking, we can move on and take care of our veggies, get all of those. Another secret, I took this out a little earlier and then I had to leave, and when I got home I was hoping it was still going to be a little bit frozen, but to cut bacon when it's still partially frozen is the best. If you're going to try to dice it up, mine is a little bit on the thawed end and I kind of wish that it would have been a little more frozen, but it's not. But we're just going to work with it. Sometimes your plan in the kitchen doesn't go as planned, so you just kind of have to roll with whatever you're working with, but it's going to be totally fine. Bacon doesn't have to be perfect, because if we do end up with some bigger pieces, which is totally fine with me, I'll save the bigger pieces for the garnish and put those on there, and then we'll save the smaller stuff, which will go in the soup in the crock pot. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but the soup is going to go in the crock pot. It's going to cook for about 6 hours. It's also something that you could start earlier in the day if you wanted to, but you can also just start it mid-morning and then have it ready whatever time you're ready to eat dinner. All right, so we're going to wash our hands and get ready to do our bacon. All right, so we've got our bacon right here. We're getting this all nice and brown. And before we start on our veggies for our chowder, we are going to add some seasonings to our chicken. We want to make sure we get this seasoned up really well. So we're going to add some salt. We're going to add some fresh black pepper. You can add as much pepper as you like. If my husband had it his way, we'd probably add the whole thing. But we're not going to do that. We're going to add in about a teaspoon and a half of oregano. I don't measure very many things. I'm going to add a little poultry seasoning because we're using a chicken broth. I just think that a little bit of poultry seasoning in this chowder is going to be good. So we're going to add about half a teaspoon or so of that. We're going to add in a little bit of basil. Little dried basil. We have about, well, that one's empty. We have about a teaspoon there. We're going to add, even though we're going to put onions in our soup, we're still going to add some onion powder to our chicken. So we're going to add a little onion powder. And then we're going to add a little Dijon mustard seasoning. This is interesting. You can use ground mustard or you can use ground Dijon. I just like the flavor that the depth of flavor this gives the chicken. So we're just going to get this all stirred up, and we're just going to let this continue to cook. We want some nice color on this. We want to get some nice brown color. What we can do with this is our chicken is probably going to start getting a little bit of fawn on the bottom of our pan. And for those of you that don't know what fawn is the brown bits that collect in the bottom of your pan when you're cooking a meat or even veggies. And so when you put in something with liquid, it will deglaze that pan and pick up all of those brown bits and all of that wonderful flavor that's on the bottom of your pan. You don't have to use liquid if you're not doing a soup or a sauce or something like that. You can put in vegetables, and vegetables will do the same thing because onions and celery are so much water that if you put those in, the juice that's released from the vegetables will actually help deglaze the pan as well. So you could put your onions and celery in here to deglaze our pan if we wanted to, but because I'm making a broth or making a chowder, I'm going to go ahead and use the broth to deglaze the pan when I'm ready to do that. So we're going to give our bacon here another little toss, and then we're going to get started on our vegetables. There is nothing better than the smell of bacon cooking in your kitchen. Let me tell you, that is one of my favorite smells ever. So we're going to get started on all of these beautiful vegetables. We have our chicken stock here that is dissolving. This is our better than bouillon. And we are going to peel potatoes really quick. I remember as a kid peeling potatoes in my grandmother's kitchen. We were big meat and potato fans in my house. My grandfather was a rancher, and he ate meat and potatoes every single day, breakfast and lunch, or breakfast and dinner, excuse me. So he always had to have his potatoes. So I peeled a lot of potatoes as a kid, but I also learned to really love potatoes too. Potatoes are one of my favorite foods. If I had to pick a carb that would be super hard to give up, it would definitely be the potato. All right, so we have one more potato to peel real quick. This chowder actually goes together really fairly quick. It doesn't really take that long. I think the longest part of this is probably just cooking the meats that are for it. And you don't necessarily have to have your chicken cooked all the way through, because it's going to cook for 6 hours in the crock pot in that yummy chicken broth with all those vegetables. So you don't necessarily have to have your chicken cooked all the way through, because it will finish cooking in the crock pot with everything else. All right, so I think we have those chopped. So we're going to give these potatoes just a really quick rinse just to get the rest of the dirt off of them. And then we are going to give them a really good dice. So we cut them in half. We're going to cut that half in half lengthwise, and then we're going to cut that into thirds. And then we are just going to give it a good chop, making sure that we have our potatoes all the same size so that everything cooks in the same time. We don't want some things that are cooked already and then you're still waiting on other veggies in the crock pot to cook. So we want to make sure that we have everything the same diameter so we have even cooking with everything. So a little thing about corn. To make this corn chowder, I typically use frozen corn because that's what I usually have on hand. But today what I have on hand is canned, and it's going to be just fine. It's going to work. It's going to work just great. I'm not going to worry too much about it. That's the nice thing about when you are cooking at home. Sometimes you just have to go with what you have on hand, and that's not a big deal. I have even put broccoli in this soup before, and it's been amazing. It really can just be whatever you have on hand, especially if you're working with a budget and you don't want to have to go to the store and buy veggies that you don't have, then don't worry about it. The other tip is on onions. If you don't have fresh onions in your house, just use the onion powder and it'll be fine. Use dehydrated onion if you have it. Speaking of dehydrating, I am going to be doing something super fun here this week on my channel, so make sure that you stay tuned and keep checking back for this video. But we are going to be dehydrating some garlic and some onions in our dehydrator, and we are going to be making some homemade fresh ground garlic powder and onion powder, which I am super excited about, because unless you buy the super expensive stuff in the stores, a lot of times you will look at the package and you would be surprised the ingredients that they put in it besides what it is. A lot of times with your onion powders and your garlic powders and that kind of stuff, they add stabilizers in a lot of those things, and they add preservatives to keep it fresh in the container. That's just not something that I want. I don't want to be eating that. So I had never thought about making my own onion powder and garlic powder until just recently. And I've been doing a lot of research on it. And so I am super excited that now I know how to do this. And I'm going to start doing my own onions and garlic in my dehydrator and putting them in containers and keeping them. They'll keep a long time, and they're going to be fresh, and you're going to know exactly what's in them. And if you don't have a dehydrator, it's not a big deal. You can actually dehydrate onions and garlic right in your oven if you need to. You don't have to go out and spend a ton of money on a dehydrator if you don't already have one. Then just use your oven, and I'll go over that in the videos when we get ready to do some dehydrating. We're also going to be dehydrating some mushrooms. I got some beautiful mushrooms at Costco, and even though we love mushrooms and we eat them quite a bit, I'm not going to be able to go through the entire container, and I really don't want to lose those. So when you are working with a budget and you are needing to stretch things and you are not wanting to waste ingredients, having a way to dehydrate and preserve those things is perfect. If you don't have a dehydrator, carrots, celery, onion, those types of things, they freeze beautifully in a freezer bag or a vacuum seal bag, whatever kind of way that you freeze things. Even if you have a freezer container, you can chop a whole bunch of them, put them in the freezer container, throw them in their freezer, and then you have them whenever you need to have fresh carrots, celery, onion, and then you're not worrying about wasting those things because they're going to go bad before you can use them all. So we are just cutting up our carrots. Our bacon is smelling amazing. Our chicken is smelling so good with all of those seasonings that we put in it. I'm putting about 3 carrots in this because I love carrots in my chowder. So I definitely want to have a good amount of carrots in the chowder just to bulk up those veggies. So we have our, that didn't go through. We have our carrots, and then we're going to do our onions. And then we are going to put in our canned corn. We're going to drain it. We don't want all that juice from the corn in there. We don't want to have all that. Okay, we're going to cut up our onion now. We just need to cut off the ends of this, cut off our root end, cut off the tip. We're just going to slice this. So as I told you before, if you didn't see that video, when I cut onions, I know this is not the right way. This is not the way that they teach you in culinary school, but I choose to cut them this way just because for me it's safer. When I taught cooking classes, this is the way I would teach them to cut so that I didn't have to worry about them having a knife go towards their hand, especially when you're dealing with teenagers. It's a little bit scary sometimes to teach them about cutting towards their hand. So I just felt a lot safer having them cut with the slices down on the board and not having to worry about them cutting themselves. That was the last thing that I wanted. So we still end up with beautiful diced onions. This way you're able to still get small dices if you want, which is what I like because I'm not a huge onion fan, but I still like that little bit of onion flavor. All right, so we have our onions done and ready to go. We're going to put those in here. We're going to give our bacon a stir. Looks like our chicken is ready and it looks amazing. You can see our color on our chicken here. So we're just going to take all this chicken, we're going to put this right into our crock pot with our vegetables. Now this is going to be, when it cooks for the 6 hours in our crock pot, it is going to be finished with heavy cream. If you are not wanting to put dairy in it, if you're wanting to keep it dairy free, then you don't need to put anything in it. You can serve it just the way it is with just the broth and have more of a broth-based soup. It's totally your preference, up to you what it is you like to do. That's the wonderful thing about cooking in your kitchen, is you get to make the recipe the way that you want it, to your liking. Same with, like I said, when I put broccoli in this before, you could totally add broccoli to it now if you wanted to. If you wanted to make this more veggie forward, you could totally do that. It's completely up to you. Drain this real quick. All right, we're going to add our canned corn in here. We're gonna give all this a stir. Our bacon still has a few minutes to cook, but it's gonna come along real quick now that it's started. That's the thing with bacon. Once bacon starts to cook, it really comes along quickly. It doesn't take long once it starts to brown. So don't walk away from it when you're cooking it. Make sure that you stay on top of it. Another thing I was gonna tell you about this soup is if you are wanting to freeze part of it. So I like to use this soup as a freezer meal. So I like to make the full batch, and then I will take out a portion or two out of this pot before I add the heavy cream to it, and I'll put it into a freezer safe container, or I'll put it into a container, let it cool, and then I'll put it into a freezer bag, and I'll put that in my freezer. Then when I get ready to serve it, then I can heat it up, and I can add the cream or the half and half or the milk or whatever it is that you want to put in it. But then you can add those things to it when you serve it the second time around. I'm not sure if I'm going to save any of this because we're supposed to have some pretty cool weather the rest of this week, so it's probably we're going to have it a couple of nights in a row, and it may be even a good lunch for my husband one day during the week. So our bacon is done, and we are going to get it out onto some paper towel so that it can drain. We don't want to put all of this bacon grease in our soup. That is the last thing we want, is a greasy chowder. So we are going to just get all of our bacon put onto this paper towel real quick so that it can drain a lot of the grease off. And then we're just going to add this to our soup. We're going to add our broth, and it's going to be ready to cook for 6 hours. And then we are going to make some biscuits. Like I said, we're trying a new biscuit recipe tonight. And I will share a link to this recipe. These are amazing biscuits, and I'm super excited to share them with you tonight. I'm super excited to share this recipe. This bacon it just smells so good. To me, there's nothing better than the smell of bacon, especially if it's bacon cooking outside. That's the best. When you're camping and you wake up to the smell of bacon, there's nothing better. That is a smell that is just heavenly to me. All right, we've almost got it all. So we're just gonna let it drain for a second while we add our broth and get our soup completely stirred up. Want to get everything incorporated in our soup while our bacon drains. So let's take a look at our soup over here. So we have our cup of our better than bouillon right here, and we're just going to pour all of this yummy broth right into our crock pot. And then we are going to give this a stir. Get all of that chicken and the potatoes and the carrots and the celery and yes, even the onion, even though I don't like it. We've got that all mixed up. We are going to take some of our bacon now that we have right here that is draining on our paper towel. Remember I said we're going to save a little bit of this so we have some for garnish. So we're going to grab a little bowl so we can put some of this bacon in to garnish our soup tonight. And that looks like a good amount right there. And then we're just going to add the rest of this bacon that's on this paper towel. We're going to add this right to our soup. And we are going to stir this up. We're going to turn we're going to let it cook on high for about 6 hours, and then we are going to make some biscuits. Our soup is smelling amazing. We're going to get started on our biscuits. I'm excited to try this new recipe. I follow a lady on YouTube that has phenomenal recipes. She does food preserving and canning and freezer meals and all those things, and I just love her stuff. And so I saw her do these biscuits, and I thought these will be perfect with our potato bacon chicken corn chowder. So in this measuring cup, I have 3/4 of a cup of half and half and a tablespoon of lemon juice. This is a good substitute if you don't have buttermilk in the house and you want to make a really tasty biscuit, then this is a good substitute for that. So we're going to start off our recipe with 2 cups of flour in a bowl. And as I've said before, baking is an exact science. So you want to make sure that your measurements are right on so that you end up with the right thing. You don't end up with something not tasty. So we're gonna do 2 cups of flour in here. We're gonna do 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Baking powder is what makes these rise. Now this recipe, another thing that makes this unique is this recipe has baking soda in it. And I've never done a recipe with baking soda before. Usually your buttermilk biscuits just have baking powder, flour, your buttermilk, your salt, sometimes a little bit of sugar. But this actually has a 1/4 teaspoon of, or actually, excuse me, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda in it. So that is something that's unique. I've never seen a recipe for a buttermilk biscuit that has baking soda. And then we're also going to add 1 teaspoon of salt. We want our biscuits to have great flavor. And then we have 8 tablespoons of really cold butter. That's another secret to really, really good biscuits, is to have really, really cold butter. You don't want your butter to be at room temperature or even slightly soft. You want it to be nice and cold and firm, because as your biscuits bake and they start to fluff up, your butter melts and it expands. It releases moisture, and that's what gives you those beautiful flaky layers and a really light and flaky biscuit. So we're gonna cut this. You wanna cut these into pretty small pieces so that it makes it easier to cut into your butter. So I'm gonna cut these into about 1/2 tablespoon chunks, and then we are going to take each one of these chunks and we're gonna cut them into small bits so we can add this to our flour and make it easier for us to mix up. I love a good biscuit. My favorite way to eat a biscuit, obviously, is with sausage gravy. But there's also nothing like a nice flaky biscuit with some fresh made jam on it, or made into a breakfast sandwich if you have leftover. My husband loves it when I make biscuits and we have leftover biscuits for the weekend, and I can make him a breakfast sandwich. He loves to have a bacon or a sausage with egg and cheese on a fresh homemade biscuit. So when I do make biscuits, I try to make a little bit extra so that he has those for weekend breakfast, especially if I know he's got lots of things to do outside, and I want to make sure he has a hearty breakfast before he goes outside to work. So we're going to use our pastry blender, and we're just going to get in here with this. We want pretty small pieces together. So typical recipes I've seen, they say you want pea size. That's not what you want. What you want is super, super small pieces mixed into your flour, so that there isn't bigger chunks. They can be okay, but I have found that a smaller chunk of butter in your biscuit actually makes a better biscuit. So you want to really mix this in well. Cut your butter in. Take the time to do this. Don't rush this part. This is a part that you really should take your time with. And if you need to, put on some good music, put on like a podcast, or put on a book or something like that that you love to listen to, and just take your time, take a few minutes and really get your butter incorporated into your flour, into those really small bits, so that you wind up with a perfect biscuit. I don't see a sense in going to all the trouble of making these if you're not going to take a time to really do this the right way, so that you wind up with a good product. You don't want to end up with, you don't want to go through all this work and end up with a tough biscuit. You don't want to go through all this work and end up with a biscuit that isn't going to rise. And I have had that happen many, many times in all the years that I've been cooking. I've had that happen a lot of times where I was just in too big of a rush. I just didn't take the time to make sure that I really got my flour incorporated into my butter, that I really got the right size chunks mixed into my butter, and ended up with a biscuit that looked like a pancake on the sheet pan. And that's not what we want. We want a nice flaky biscuit with a good rise on it. our dough is all nice and mixed up with our half and half, we're going to take just a little bit of flour. We want a little flour on our board here just so that we don't have our dough stick. We're going to spread this out a little bit so we have a good working surface. Now the other thing that makes this recipe very unique that I've never seen before, I mean, I'm sure it's been around, but I've never seen it done with biscuits before, is we're going to do what they call the fold method. So we're going to get our dough together here. We're just going to kind of pat it together a little bit. And then we are going to get our rolling pin and we're going to roll this out into a rectangle. Let's put a little bit of flour on our rolling pin and we're going to roll this out into a rectangle. And what is going to give these biscuits a really flaky texture is, let's move it out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. So we have this rolled out. We're going to fold this into thirds now. We're going to fold it into 3 pieces, just like this. We're going to turn it 90 degrees. We're going to give ourselves a little more flour on our board, a little bit of flour up on top, and now we're going to roll this section into thirds. We're going to roll it out first, and then we're going to put this into thirds. Let's just give it a little bit more of a roll. You can see those sections came together really nice. Now we're going to roll this direction. We're going to roll it this direction. And then we're going to roll this out one more time. And this is going to be the final roll for this dough. And then we're going to cut it out into our beautiful biscuits. So we don't want this super thin. I think we're good right about there. That's a good thickness, I think. So now we're just going to take our biscuit cutter. We like biscuits a little bit bigger, but you can see already in this that we've got some beautiful flakiness. You can see these layers that are right in here. That's what the folding method does for these biscuits. And it makes them super light, super fluffy. And then we're going to give these a little bit of an egg wash before they go into the oven. So we're going to keep cutting out our biscuits, using up all of our dough. Let's don't waste any of this beautiful dough. Let's take the rest of this. This, you don't overhandle it when you mix it back up again. Just kind of get it in a ball if you can, and then let the rolling pin do the work for you. Kind of get it mushed together a little bit. And then we're just going to use our rolling pin to help us do the work. So we're not overhandling this dough. That's the last thing you want to do, is overhandle it. All right, so we're going to cut another biscuit here. I'm going to put that there. Take that little bit off. We'll get another biscuit here. We're going to put that here. And I think we can get one more biscuit out of this. So we're just going to very carefully try not to mash this too much. This, because it's just the last little bit, I think I'm going to just hand form it, and then I'm going to cut it with the cutter the best I can. Usually your last biscuit's not the prettiest anyway, because you're using up what's left, but we still have those beautiful layers. We're going to set that on there. Let me give my hands a quick rinse. Okay, we are going to do an egg wash, which is just an egg. We're going to put just a tiny drop of water in it. Take our whisk. Give this a good whisk real quick, and then we are going to brush these. I love these silicone pastry brushes. They're amazing. They clean up so nice. We're just going to put a little bit of egg wash on this so these come out nice and beautiful. And then these are gonna bake at 400 degrees for about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how hot your oven gets. All right, so our biscuits are all brushed with our egg wash. They're looking beautiful. We're gonna throw these in the oven. We're gonna let these bake. And those are gonna be tasty with our chowder. I'm smelling our biscuits and they smell so good. I'm super happy with these. As you can see, they're really hot, so I'm not gonna really hold them, but you can see our flaky layers on these biscuits. We're gonna let these cool and there will be a taste test. All right, so our biscuits are done, and as you can see all those flaky layers in there. Those look so good. Our soup is ready, and I just need to finish this with a little bit of heavy cream. Well, if you consider a cup a little bit. This is our soup. This is what this looks like. You can see all those veggies in there, our carrots, our celery, our onions, and our potatoes. We're gonna put our heavy cream in here. I'm just gonna eyeball it. We're just gonna stir this in. And we are gonna let that cook in the crock pot for about another 15 minutes on high, just so that our cream can thicken up. And then it will be ready for a nice bowl with a fresh biscuit. I wanna thank you for joining me in my kitchen today. If you liked this video, please give it a like. If you're new around here, you wanna continue to see what I post, make sure you subscribe to my channel, and I appreciate you all being here. See you later, friends.